Welcome. My name's Edoardo Aromataris, and it's my pleasure to be able to host this latest in our series of JBI live webinars around what I hope you'll find an incredibly interesting topic, and that's all about searching for studies and the basics of a systematic search during the conduct of a systematic review or any evidence synthesis, in fact. And we are really fortunate today to have two very experienced presenters and very experienced in this topic, and that is Amanda Ross-White and Terena Solomons. Before we go any further, however, I would like to acknowledge that we're delivering this webinar from the lands of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and the Whadjuk people in Perth. I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people and their ongoing cultures and connection to lands and waters of Australia. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you work on today, also those of you joining from around Australia and across the globe, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar today also. Additionally, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples in Canada, where one of our presenters is joining us from today. And now, without any further ado, I would like to just briefly present Amanda Ross-White, who is currently the interim head of the Bracken Health Sciences Library at Queen's University and president of the Canadian Health Libraries Association, and also Terena Solomons, who's a research librarian with the Western Australian Group for Evidence-Informed Healthcare Practice, which is a JBI Centre of Excellence in the School of Nursing at Curtin University in WA. Without any further ado, Amanda, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I like to start with this particular image when thinking about searching because it's a great, for me anyway, depiction of the different ways you can search. Think of it a little bit like fishing. You can do it in different ways and for different purposes. So just as if you're writing for a 10-page paper, you don't need absolutely everything in the ocean. You just need a few select references to bolster a particular point. Think of that a little bit like fishing with a line. But when you're doing a systematic review, you need to have the confidence that you found everything related to the topic. So it's a little bit more like fishing with a trawler. You're going to get your giant net out and you're going to catch a lot of tuna and also a few dolphins and some spare tire and goodness knows what other garbage, unfortunately, is in our oceans. So you need to find everything on a particular topic, including things that prove your point and possibly things that contradict it. So it involves a different way of thinking about finding studies or articles that you may have done in your graduate work or in your undergraduate work in the past. So that's also kind of the point. It can feel a little bit overwhelming. You run the risk of getting too many studies rather than too few. Finding the balance between what is useful and what is just too much can be tricky. It makes it a little bit more of an art than a science, and it'll take practice and expertise. So this webinar is really designed to help you get a little bit more confident in your search strategies and maybe feel a little bit less like this poor fellow on the screen. So in part one, we're going to talk a little bit about some search basics. We'll start with the importance of a transparent and reproducible search strategy. Why does any of this matter in the first place? We'll then work through the JBI three-step search process, explaining what makes this unique and how it can help you develop your search and have confidence that you're retrieving everything. We'll also talk about breaking down your review question. Whether you use PICO or PCC or any of the other search question formats, breaking it down into its component parts can help make your search strategy better. Lastly, part one, we'll also talk a little bit about finding seed references, including using several tools that can help you with your search and get you started. So, transparency and reproducibility. Review searches need to be transparent. And they need to use keywords. But this is often one of the biggest errors we see in reviews. Too often, authors just describe their search in a way that doesn't make sense. They just list their keywords, but don't explain how they were combined. They only list some databases, not all. They don't add the search platform. They don't even explain who did the search. What that means is really that it's not reproducible. So your search should be described in such a way that anyone can take your instructions and recreate the search exactly as you did, almost like a recipe. So for example, you need to explain not just which databases you searched, but also what platforms. Medline can be searched using the PubMed interface, but also Ovid or Web Science or Ebsco host and multiple other platforms. Embase can be searched on Ovid or on the proprietary database embase.com. Many databases are updated daily or weekly. So you need to know exactly when you searched because that will help narrow down the results. And the difference between January 1st and January 15th for a search might be very significant. Knowing what date you searched and if you put any restrictions on your limits as to how far back you searched as well can influence the results. Who did the search? I'm a librarian, so one of my personal pet peeves is when they describe a search as done by a librarian or an information specialist, but that person doesn't get a name. So I don't think that shows a lot of respect for the professional who did the work. I think if you did the search yourself, great, say that. But if you had a librarian or information specialist do the search, they should be named. If they just helped you or consulted with you, but they didn't actually perform the search, put them in the acknowledgements. That's certainly acceptable. Was your search peer reviewed? Some people choose to have their searches peer reviewed separately from the protocol. And if you've done that, you should say so. There are a lot more details that you can record about your searches than we have time to get into today, but I highly recommend, if you haven't already seen it, Prisma S. So that will provide you with the full details of what you should report about your searches, and you can find that on the Prisma webpage. So JBI has a 3-step process for searching. While many other recommendations include the iterative process of search, JBI is the only one to make this explicit. So it starts with that initial search. This phase 1 search, it can be done in Medline or CINAHL or PubMed or whatever database of your choice, depending on your topic. But the key point is that it should be analyzed to see how effective it is in terms of precision and recall. So this allows you to find additional terms in the title or abstract or controlled vocabulary terms used in the database and ensure that second search, that phase 2 search, is as complete as possible. So the initial search is included in your protocol, so it's peer reviewed along with the rest of the protocol. And as I mentioned earlier, some people also choose to peer review the search separately using a tool called PRESS, Peer Review of Electronic Search Strategies. It's also useful to simply have your search reviewed by the entire team that you're working with to ensure all your terms are included and that everybody on the team is using the same definition and meanings behind those terms. So once you've got your feedback on your search through that peer review process or through consulting with the team or both, then you're ready to do that phase 2, those full searches. You now need to both perfect your search in your original database and translate the search to any additional sources or databases you are using. So later, Terena will talk about a Medline search and translate into CINAHL as our example of that phase 2 search. Lastly, you've got your phase 3, where you take all the studies you've included in your review and review their reference lists. You can also compare this to your initial results to ensure your phase 2 search was as complete as possible. If you're only finding 1 or 2 missing, then you've probably done a pretty good job of your phase 2 search. But if you find that the references of your included studies are including a lot that you've missed, you might want to go back and take a look to see if there's additional terms that you may want to include. So logic grids are a really great way to provide that visual analysis of your search based on your question. I've got an example question here, and each column represents one element of the PCC framework derived from that particular question. What are the perceived barriers and facilitators for engaging in the practice of medical assistance in dying for physicians, nurse practitioners, and medical residents in Canada? In each section or each column, you can think of any words that can describe that particular population, concept, or context. So in this example, our population is the providers, their concept is medical assistance in dying, and our context is here in Canada. So now you can list those words or synonyms related to each component. So my population, I know it's going to include physicians, it might include nurses or nurse practitioners or medical residents and maybe some others. And then going on in each column, concept, we have medical assistance in dying, which may be called assisted dying, which may be called euthanasia, and we can continue on like that. So that logic grid helps us apply our boolean logic using or and when developing the search strategy. So remember or between the terms of a similar concept within each column, and then tie the different concepts together using and. So I've got another little visualization for that. So, or as I said, is to combine similar concepts. So in this particular example, we have providers or physicians or nurses, anybody who might provide the service, but it doesn't particularly matter which person does. And then and combines the concepts where each category is necessary. So in this case, our population, our concept, or our context. Or if you need to see another logic grid visualization, or is used to combine terms within a category, such as providers, physicians, nurses, medical residents, and is used to combine terms across categories. We want studies about persons who provide medical assistance in dying in a specific context of Canada. Articles that meet only 2 of those 3 criteria, we don't want to include those. So and ensures that each column is required in any study we're pulling up within the search. So it's also possible, of course, and usually done to start your search with known articles or seed references. Chances are pretty good if you're doing a review on a topic, you're not learning about it for the first time. So it's okay to think about those articles that you know, or the articles that other people on your team know about that you would kind of expect to find in your search. Anything that's on topic and relevant to your question. Start with those and take a look at what terms they used. How were they indexed in the different databases? Use those to start your search and build from there. You can find additional seed references using lots of free tools. I use Google Scholar, Epistemonikos, and Trip very regularly as a great place to find those seed references. I just try putting in a few keywords, see what comes up, play with those tools, and see what I can find. Once you found a couple of articles with those tools, go back into your databases and see if you could find them there. How were they indexed? What keywords were used? You may also have access to a library discovery tool. These often search multiple databases at once, so you can use these both to find articles and to see which databases you have access to that deliver the most results. Lastly, lots of people are starting to use AI for a lot of things, including seed references. And while some of these tools are useful, and I don't want to diminish that, I generally say use them with a lot of caution if you decide to do so. AI is really, really good at understanding what a citation looks like, and so it tends to create ones that don't actually exist. So if you use AI, be cautious of what you find and double check it with another source. So we do have a lot more detail in the JBI search chapter. And if you need to find that, you can find that in the JBI manual there. There's just a link to that as well. And Terena is going to show us a search in Medline. So I think I can stop sharing and she can take over.
Great. Thank you very much, Amanda. So yes, today I will be presenting a case study of how a search strategy was developed for a published JBI scoping review. I will deconstruct the Medline and CINAHL database searches, explaining the sources and tools used to find the seed references from which the search terms were gathered. I will explain how to test that your search strategy is capturing those seed references. And I'll cover the importance of having a logic grid or a concept table for keeping track of the keywords and their index terms, which is important for translating your search from one database to the next. So I worked with a team of 7 nursing academics from around Australia to publish the scoping review protocol and the final scoping review on the individual and environmental factors that influence the longevity of newcomers to nursing and midwifery. The citation for the protocol and for the final review are here on the screen, and Jess from JBI will pop those into the chat. And the search strategies are in Appendix 1. For scoping reviews, the mnemonic for breaking down the review question into its components is PCC. Population, concept or phenomena of interest, and context. As Amanda explained, it's the who, what, and where. The scoping review question was, what environmental and individual factors influence new registered nurses and new registered midwives to stay in or leave the profession within the first 3 years of clinical practice in their discipline? In this case, the population is new graduate nurses or new graduate midwives. The concept or the phenomena of interest is the intention to stay in or to leave the profession, i.e. turnover. The context was any primary, secondary or tertiary healthcare setting that graduate nurses are employed, for example, aged care, mental health, community settings, etc. For this review question, we decided to search two components, population and concept, and screen for the context. The reason for this is that the healthcare setting may not have been well described or mentioned in the title or the abstract or indexed. The first step in the process of developing a comprehensive search strategy is to do preliminary exploratory searching of the literature. I used to call this a scoping search, but some people get confused between scoping search and scoping review, so I have now changed my vocabulary to call it preliminary exploratory searching. This kind of searching serves several purposes. Firstly, it is to check whether a systematic or scoping review has been published on a topic. There is no point in reinventing the wheel and using up precious research resources. Secondly, it's important to gain background knowledge of the topic and understand the vocabulary that is being used. Thirdly, it is useful to find seed references, that is, studies that meet the inclusion criteria, which can be used to gather the keywords and controlled vocabulary, also referred to as index terms, subject headings, or thesauri. The fourth reason when exploring the literature is to keep an eye out for search strategies for a component of your review question. There might be a review on new graduate nurses and their experiences in the ICU, and so looking at the published search strategy can hopefully, provided it's transparent and reproducible, give you an idea of what keywords and controlled vocabulary that they used. For this review, I checked these sources: JBI EBP database and Cochrane Library, which have high quality reported search strategies. Prospero is an international prospective register of systematic reviews, so should be checked to see if there's any in-progress reviews happening. I also checked Epistemonicus, which Amanda mentioned, and also did preliminary searches in Medline on the Ovid platform and CINAHL on the Ebsco platform. Text mining is a process to help identify search terms using software that mine or analyze text for recurrent words or phrases. These help identify new search terms that you may not have considered. I have written about several of these tools in this article in JHELA, Journal of Health Information and Libraries Australasia, which Jess will pop into the chat. Two text mining tools that I'll talk about today are Mesh on Demand and PubMed Reminder. Mesh on Demand is a software tool developed by the National Library of Medicine. It analyses the text inputted and matches it against PubMed data to generate mesh subject headings and 10 similar articles based on that text. So you can copy and paste into Mesh on Demand your scoping review protocol, your research proposal, or a relevant journal article abstract. In this screenshot here, I've copied an abstract from a journal, and Mesh on Demand has listed the subject headings here, and then the similar articles based on that text from PubMed. And you can click on the PubMed IDs, and that will take you to the PubMed record. PubMed Reminder provides a different overview of PubMed data, showing publication trends over the years, who key authors are on the topic, and the journal titles the topic is published in. It also shows frequent keywords and mesh subject headings used. To use PubMed Reminder, you add a search string and then click on the Go to PubMed with query. In this case, I searched for new graduate nurse or new graduate midwife in the first bracket, combined it with and, with turnover or attrition or retention, and then clicked on Go to PubMed query. In this screenshot, you can see that Lassinger has written quite a few papers on this topic, and 3 of her papers went through our title abstract and full text screening to be included in our final review. And Jess will pop the link to PubMed Reminder into the chat. So I created the original search strategy for this scoping review back in 2020, well before the advent of generative AI tools like ChatGPT and the plethora of AI tools that have popped up since then. I thought I should mention that there are now a number of tools that you can explore the literature using natural language questions. These are the ones that I regularly use for exploring the literature: Consensus, Perplexity, Elicit, and Scopus AI. As Amanda mentioned, like all AI tools, you need to verify that the papers actually exist and also that they are not published by predatory publishers. I would like to bring to your attention this very recent paper by Cassandra Gorton, a librarian at Monash Health in Australia, who recently compared and rated a swathe of AI tools for literature searching in the latest issue of JHILA, Journal of Health Information and Libraries, Australasia. So while conducting the initial exploratory search, I came across this study which met the inclusion criteria for the review. I'm a colour coding kind of gal, and so I used yellow to highlight the words for the population. So we can see nursing recruits, graduate nurses, graduated nurses, and then in yellow, in green, highlighting the concept of turnover, retention, nurse turnover, professional turnover, intention to leave. So when you find a seed reference, it's important to see which databases it is indexed in, and importantly, what subject headings or index terms are used to describe the paper. You can see here that in Medline, the article was indexed with the MESH subject heading, nursing staff, hospital, with the subheading of psychology. In Embase, a large European database, they use the term nursing staff, and in CINAHL, they use the term new graduate nurses. You can see in green that Medline and CINAHL use the phrase personnel turnover, whereas Embase uses the phrase personnel management. You will notice that there are some asterisks besides some of these terms. So when the articles are indexed, the indexer indicates using the asterisks that this is the focus of the article. As Amanda mentioned in her presentation, it is important to create a logic grid, sometimes referred to as a concept table or a search planner, to gather together all the keywords and subject headings. These are gathered from seed references, from using text mining tools, and also ideas from your review team. Recording the subject headings is really important for when you translate the search strategy from one database to the next, because the subject headings can be different. Remember the personnel and personnel management. So was it personnel turnover and personnel management example? And you will notice that some of the keywords have been crossed out, which I'll explain later in my presentation. So this is a screenshot of the Medline record on the Ovid platform of the seed reference. And we can see here, these are the MESH subject headings. And you'll also notice that there's a keyword heading, and that is what the author of the paper has said that the article is about. This is a screenshot of the seed record in the CINAHL database on the Ebsco platform. Notice that CINAHL has major subjects and minor subjects. So it's important to make a note of both. Then the minor subjects can be good for finding quantitative or qualitative studies. You can see they have a heading for that, as well as a heading for questionnaires. So this is the final search strategy for our population of new graduate nurses or midwives. You can see in the first line that we've searched for new graduate midwife, new nurse, novice, neophyte, etc. The asterisks are truncation. So those, it will find nurse or nurses or nursing, midwife or midwifery. .ti, AB, KF is telling the database to look in the title, abstract, and author keyword fields of Medline. Lines 2 to 6 use the adjacency operator, ADJ, with a number. So that is so this example in line number 4 is you looking for variations in phrases. For example, new graduate nurse, recently graduated registered nurses, midwives who have recently graduated, etc. Lines 7, 8, 9 are the mesh subject headings indicated by the slash at the end. So in line 10, we are combining all these synonyms with or. Think of or as meaning more. As Amanda mentioned, developing a comprehensive search strategy is an iterative process. It involves testing keywords and index terms to see if there are any other meanings that could be generating a lot of noise in your search. You may have noticed that on the logic grid that 2 terms had been crossed out. Our review team members suggested the term career longevity and churn. When I was testing career longevity in Medline, it came up with lots of articles on the various surgical procedures affecting the career longevity of racehorses. Medline covers veterinary science, and so that's why these articles were coming up. The word churn to mean turnover of staff. However, when I tested it, I discovered a lot of articles relating to health insurance were coming up. Churn is defined as a change in insurance plan in the United States. The word retention can mean retention of staff, but it can also mean fluid retention, urinary retention, and knowledge retention. The word attrition can mean staff leaving an organisation, but in testing this in the databases, I discovered that the term tooth attrition or dental attrition were coming up because Medline also indexes the dentistry literature. So you certainly learn a lot of things when you're conducting a systematic search. This is the final search strategy for the concept of staying in or leaving the profession, using lots of adjacency operators to find phrases like intent or intention to stay or leave or quit, retention of registered new midwives, turnover of staff, rates of attrition for registered nurses. The strategy also includes in line 17, the mesh subject heading for personnel turnover. Lines 20 and 21 are limiters within the database, so it's limiting to English language and the date of publication. And I always like to do these separately so you can see what the numbers are. A quick way of testing that your search strategy is capturing your seed reference is to search for the seed reference title. As you can see in line 22, I've put in the title .ti. And then I've used the not operator. So in this example, 21, not 22. So we can see here that our final results for the search were 3,478, less 1, 3,477. So that's indicating that this search strategy is capturing that seed reference. Once you've finalised the search strategy in the first database, in this case it's Medline on the Ovid platform, you translate or adapt the search to other databases on their respective platforms. This involves keeping the same keywords but incorporating potentially different subject headings. This is why it's important to keep a record of this data in your logic grid or your concept table. This is what the CINAHL search looks like on the Ebsco platform at the time that the search was run. CINAHL at the time did not have a title abstract combined field like Medline's does, so you needed to search them separately, like I've highlighted here, TI for title and AB for abstract. Ebsco have developed a new user interface that has been released this year. The universities that I work at in Perth are moving to the new platform new user interface in July this year. So I read only in the last couple of weeks that on the expert searching listserv that the new Ebsco interface, that they have developed a title abstract combined field, which is represented by the code XB. When translating searches to other databases, you need to change the database syntax. In this case, I've translated AGJ3 for adjacency to N3. That's what Ebsco uses. So it's looking for 3 words between early career and nurse or midwife. So the information about the syntax used in each database is held within the help files. You can see here in lines 6, 12, and 13, the CINAHL major subject headings have been used and then combined. The third step in the JBI search methods is supplementary searching of the grey literature, citation searching to find forwards and backwards references, and also hand searching in journals. This is another webinar in itself to cover the mechanics of how to do these searches and how to report them. I would like to draw your attention to this paper on the TARSUS statement, which stands for Terminology, Application and Reporting of Citation Searching. I was involved in the Delphi study along with many other librarians and information specialists from around the world to gain consensus on the guidance for when and how citation searching should be conducted for systematic reviews, and importantly, how to report it. And we have cited the TARSUS statement in the JBI search chapter, which I'd encourage you all to have a read of in the JBI Manual for Evidence Synthesis. And here is a link to the search chapter and a QR code, which Jess will pop into the chat. So thank you very much. I'd like to finish with this photo of Amanda and I in Prague last year when we attended the 72nd JBIC meeting, where we got together to do the final edits on the JBI search chapter and where we attended the Global Evidence Summit. We would like to say a big thank you to all the authors on this important resource for evidence synthesis searching. And I will now hand over to Ed, who will ask any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Terena. Thank you, Amanda. And there are lots and lots of questions coming through the Q&A and from all across the globe, which is fantastic. Now we have, I think, a nice one to start off with from the Philippines. So what are the most common mistakes researchers make when developing a search strategy, and how can we avoid them? And with regards to that, what are the best practices for translating between the different databases that I think you touched on there as well in your examples?
Wow. The most common search mistakes are sometimes not actually in the search, but in the description of the search. So I find it very frustrating when an author is writing something down about what they did about the search, and I can't even really determine what they did because it's too vague. So that is probably the one thing I see more often than anything else. It may even be an excellent search behind the scenes, but I have no way of knowing because it's not been described in enough detail. So certainly describing it as clearly as possible is essential. And certainly missing keywords or subject headings, one or the other. If you search subject headings, you miss keywords. If you search keywords, you miss subject headings. That's another one that I think is probably a big one. And I don't know if Terena has another couple that she would like to draw attention to, but.
Yeah, I do in my slides, if I can work out how to reshare my slides, I do have an example of a search strategy that is not transparent or reproducible. Let me reshare. Okay, yeah, so as Amanda said, it's important to search both subject headings and keywords. This is a strategy that they said the databases Medline, Embase, Scopus, and Google Scholar were systematically searched with the following terms and boolean operators. So they've said PRP and or platelet plasma. Which one? So just to show you, if you used and with all those terms, you'd end up with 0. If you used or between all of those, you'd end up with over 1 million. And then if you used brackets, putting all the similar terms together, and the second concept, I think that's what they did, but it's not explicit from the description. So yeah, yeah, not explaining exactly how the search was conducted. It's like having a cake recipe and you're just given all the ingredients, but not the recipe of how to combine them.
And I see you've got a second question there as well that Catherine has actually given a good answer to already. So best practices for translating a search strategy between different databases while still maintaining accuracy. So one example is exactly when you translate ADJ3, sometimes need to be N3 or N2. So each database has its own syntax that can be slightly different or the same. So it's tempting to just sort of rerun your existing search in a new database just exactly as it is, but it won't work the same. So you do have to pay attention to each database's syntax and check to see that it's translating and working the way you would expect it to or the way you want it to. Sometimes you might have to add some additional concepts as well when moving from one database to another. For example, if you're searching on medical education and you're searching in a medical database, you'll need to add some keywords maybe related to education because that's not obvious. But if you're searching in an education database, which only has articles about education, that might not be necessary to include those because that's sort of a given from the database. So those are some of the best practices I recommend is simply for each database, you do have to sort of start from the scratch and make sure that it's working the way you would expect it to.
Thank you, Amanda. We've had a couple of questions now regarding the use of AI, and Amanda's already responded in the Q&A that she doesn't use it that frequently. Terena, did you have any comment about AI? You named some tools there. Do you have any experience with them? Do you trust them? Is it all systems go how you use those?
I really use them for initially scoping the I shouldn't use the word scoping for a scoping review, exploring the literature, finding some seed articles. In the JBI search chapter, we've cited a number of papers. One is Parisi and Sutton 2024, which is a scoping review of AI tools. And they concluded that at the moment, there's no magical AI tool that would generate a Boolean search strategy. Also, Wang 2023, they concluded that ChatGPT can't be used for a comprehensive search strategy. It misses things and it sometimes fabricates the mesh subject headings. So really, I just use those tools that I mentioned for finding seed articles and just getting an idea of a topic. Yeah.
Inevitably, there'll be a lot more research coming out regarding its use to facilitate searches, and no doubt we look forward to when we can trust it moving forward, but not quite yet, I think is the message that we're getting from you.
It feels like it's changing so rapidly that my answer today could be very different in a week or a month or a year from now. So
absolutely.
So a really interesting question has come through. Can a high number of Boolean operators interfere with the search, the quality of the search? Is it possible? Should we consider, breaking it up? Can they get too long with too many Booleans in our search strategies?
Yeah. I'm going to say I've seen both. I happen to like breaking it down in different ways and as many different lines as possible for my own. I find it easier to read. That's all. But in theory, the difference shouldn't be there. The number of results should be the same. So I don't know if Terena has a preference either.
Depends on the question, really.
Yeah. Okay.
And sometimes it might be worthwhile searching it, having an element that you screen for, because as I mentioned, it may not be in the title and the abstract, it'll be in the full text. And no matter how many concepts you're adding to the search, it's not going to find that information.
Yeah. And that's an important point. Sometimes the extensions like .tw text word, people do get confused and think that's doing a search of the entire text of the manuscript. In actual fact, that's not what it means at all. So, but that's an interesting you know, that idea there are different ways that we can shape the logic. We can get to the same endpoint, but create that a bit differently with a very long search string or breaking it up with different Booleans. I guess in practice, oftentimes, Amanda, like you said, you might split it up. It makes it a bit, I think, a bit easier to play around with and to test individual terms related to concepts if it is broken down a little bit. But on that score on Booleans, one you didn't really speak too much about, but as an editor, I see it here that always makes me a little bit nervous. Any comments about the use of not or any advice for attendees as a Boolean?
You want to take that one first, Terena?
Yeah, use with caution is my advice. I have seen that where people just want to not out a particular word, but that could be getting rid of an important paper. I'm thinking.
Yeah, I can think of a few examples where I've used it. For example, I was just doing a search today on different types of cardiac surgery in adults. So we knotted out the children rather than limit to adults. We not children and then subtracted those results. So I do use it. I always sort of say be aware of what you're doing and what can happen when you do use it. But it can be a very effective way to reduce your numbers in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Another great question's come through, and I was thinking as well about how you manage, while you were speaking, how do you manage working with review groups who are facing the prospect potentially of an empty review where there's no evidence? But the question here is, if the search yields very few results, how do you know whether in fact there is very little research or no research, or in fact it's your search strategy that's the problem?
Well, one way would be if you don't have any seed references or anything that you're aware of. If you're truly, going into this with no knowledge of any work out there, that's certainly a sign that it's probably under-researched and it's not a problem with your search strategy. And if you know of articles that should be coming up, but you can't find them with your search, that's certainly a sign that it will. And I think often just taking away one step. So in that example that I had in my logic grid, I had the practitioners, I had medical assistants in dying, and I had Canada. Well, I would take away Canada. If I got no results, I said, well, Canada, we're a small country. I'll take that away and see what I get there, and then start going through those results and seeing if that was bringing up something better. So just taking everything a step back, almost like peeling an onion, would be maybe useful.
Thank you.
Sometimes no results is what you want, though, too, because then you can say, now you have to give me grant funding because no one has ever studied this before.
Of course, and that is the power of an empty systematic review, isn't it? If it is indeed an important question to be asking. So how do you decide when to stop, iterating, testing and the like, and say, right, we're good to go. This is our search for our review.
Well, I was going to say, so I am usually working with teams. So often with that initial review, I make sure everybody on that team is comfortable and satisfied with it. And sometimes that requires just a bit more explanation. Sometimes they want to test a term that I didn't think of, and they want to see what that brings in. I essentially just wait till we get consensus with everybody on the team with that first search, and then I feel ready to go. But Terena, do you have a different answer? Or?
Yeah, pretty much the same. If they've got several key papers that answer the question that they want included in the search strategy, it's analysing those seed references like I've demonstrated and just checking that they're being captured in that search. Yeah, it's how long's a piece of string? And it's an art and a science, and sometimes you can finish a search strategy and then you think, oh, later on, oh, maybe this term. But you've got to draw the line at some point and get consensus with your team before running the searches.
So you're always, I guess, to summarise that, you're driven more by identifying your seed references and knowing that you're heading in the right direction, as opposed to the actual numbers. Your research teams, for example, say, no, that's too many to screen. We need to get the sensitivity up a bit here. Sorry, the specificity up a bit here.
They certainly do that sometimes. And
Yeah.
I often try and draw it back to the question, because essentially I'm trying to think of, okay, well, is your question too broad, or is the search too broad? Is there something in this question that we could tweak to make it a little bit more refined if that's what they need, and need a little bit more precision? And sometimes there's no way around it. Oftentimes it's simple at getting them to test something. So I'll say, okay, you know what? It looks really broad. I have 17,000 results. Look through the first 200 and get back to me and tell me what of those 200 are useful. And then maybe I might be able to see, oh, that term's not really adding as much as I thought it would, and so on. That's the beauty of that initial search, and that ability to really get consensus from everybody on that. Mm-hmm.
We have another question here about what you touched on, Terena, and a JBI review, we insist, yes, database searching, but also grey literature. Do you, and sometimes, and I've seen this working with review groups as well, you can invest a lot of time and effort on that part of your searching for very little return. Any comments, any thoughts how you go about working with your review teams to I don't know, put bounds, or where you start with grey literature searching related to a topic?
Yeah, okay. I'm just thinking of an example. How do you put boundaries on that time? Yeah, it always comes down to what the review question is. I've recently been working on a health economics type question, which, white papers, government reports, and so forth were important. And thankfully, the Curtin University Library were trialling Overton and, gosh, what was the other one? Some other kind of grey literature database at the time, which provides much better functionality. And yeah, we did find one report in that. Yes. And then it was, they actually wanted Google Advanced to be searched. So we put limits on the number of results that were going to be found. And of course, it's done right at the end, so that we're really just searching through what's left. And we just agreed only to the first 50 results for that one.
I was going to say, Terena, your recommendation to do it at the end is one that I always suggest as well, because oftentimes while you're doing your traditional literature search, you'll come up with organizations or different places that you want to explicitly look. For example, you're doing a search on cancer and you discover this great work by a cancer volunteer organization. You're going to say, oh, I want to make sure I check their webpage to see if there's anything. So that's a way of using your traditional literature search to guide your grey literature search. And it can make it a little bit more manageable.
Absolutely. And also exporting the records out of Google you kind of sometimes have to do it manually. So use those databases. If your library's trialing Overton or Policy Commons was the other one, at least they have the export function. Whereas good old Google, you can use web scrapers in Zotero or Mendeley, but it's a lot more labor intensive. So yeah, do the grey literature searching at the end.
If we have any AI people working, this is what we would like AI to be able to do. If it could please help us with grey literature searching, I would be in.
Yeah.
Good call, actually.
Yeah.
We really want the AI to help us out with the stuff that we struggle with and don't really want to do. Searching through all of those lists, yeah.
So Perplexity is one AI tool that you can't export easily. So yeah, I've found.
Now, there are some very specific questions. I don't know if we can get these through to you afterwards so you can respond to some of these people, but there's a question for Terena re your Medline search strategy. Why you've used .kf for author keywords rather than .kw for keywords?
Yeah, good question. I think I tested that, and KF was for the individual word or the phrase, and KW is the other. yeah, I'd need to go back and have a look at in Ovid Medline, they've got the search fields and it's got the details of what the difference is between KF and KW.
Mm-hmm. And thank you. There's also a couple of people have asked around the adjacency terms and the number. How do you choose the number? Do you change it between databases? What's the magic behind it?
It's testing it. Like, I know there was I usually start with 3 and then go up. The bigger the number, the bigger the gap is between those two terms. And certainly for the word newcomer, I did find a couple of articles that had newcomer, but it was 5 words away from nurse or midwife. So that's why that number was different. Yeah, so it's playing around in the databases and seeing what the results are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another question here, I'm just going to paraphrase here a little bit, and I see this often working with reviewers, and that is the actual content of the databases. So Medline appears, as you mentioned already, you can search that in lots of different ways. Is there is a part of your steps when you're working with review groups, is the first port of call, even before you worry about whether someone's done the job, before the systematic review's already been published and looking at those seed articles, to also start thinking about, well, if we want to search Medline, what do we have access to? Do we need to search these other databases? How do we find out what else they have? And is it actually useful for our question? Do you go through those processes? Are they important considerations? Or because all we're doing presumably is increasing the number of duplicates from our various diverse database searches? Any comments or thoughts?
I was going to say, it's a bit difficult for me to answer, I think, because I mostly work with the School of Nursing. So I don't tend to have reviews outside of nursing topics. Although certainly I'm starting to see more and more requests from other departments in the university, and because they know that I do systematic reviews, they're contacting me. And I have to say, well, I really don't know a lot about engineering databases. So certainly talking with the group about my review team about what fields they are in and what databases they might use is helpful, especially if it's maybe one I'm not familiar with. And I will often submit for reviews protocols for review and get suggestions to search databases from the peer reviewers that I had not thought of, but I'm happy to give it a try. As you say, it may just increase the duplicates. It may just increase the work with no recall, but happy to take their suggestions.
Okay, thank you, Amanda.
Terena,
please.
I just would like to bring to everyone's attention, at the Global Evidence Summit, I saw a poster by Alison Bethel. She's an information specialist at the University of Exeter, and she's written a paper on search summary tables, so that after you've done a search, she's got a Excel spreadsheet template where you can analyze what references were finally included and what databases they came from. So I'd encourage everyone to, I'm sure if you Googled Alison Bethel search summary tables, that article will come up and it will explain how you can retrospectively, and once you've done your search, go and see what databases were most fruitful, so that if the search needs to be updated, you might decide, okay, I'm not going to search in ERIC or a particular database that you thought was going to be useful, but in the end wasn't.
And the information science group of JBI is working on a project right now related to that too. So
fantastic. We will stay tuned. And on that note, we are fast running out of time. So it remains for me to say thank you to both of you, Amanda and Terena, for your insights. A fascinating presentation. A really, really important part of the systematic review process. I know as an editor, I provide lots of feedback on lots of submitted manuscripts to our journal. And the one that always brings a tear to my eye, it's all well enough to say, I think you have to redo some statistics here. That doesn't normally take too long. having to redo a search means you're starting all over again. So it's so important to get it right from the start, and critical in the conduct of this type of research. But thank you on behalf of all of us and all of the participants today. Before anyone goes away, however, we do have both Amanda and Terena made reference to the JBI Manual for Evidence Synthesis and the chapter regarding searching for systematic reviews, searching for methodology for JBI evidence synthesis. The manual is freely available. Anyone can click on there and get some really sound advice regarding, in this case, searching for the systematic reviews. And there's lots of other great information about different types of reviews in them and their conduct in the manual also. So we do have an evaluation that will be coming out in an email to you all, a survey link. We'd really appreciate if those of you who have attended could complete that. And of course, there's an email address there if you're interested in anything JBI, and do visit our website. And this presentation, this webinar, will appear on our YouTube channel in the very near future. And there's lots of other great webinars, past webinars that you can see there also. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you again to our presenters, and I hope you all have a wonderful day and happy reviewing and good luck with your search. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.